So we're back at Black Sea Offstage Talks, and I'm joined here by Iain Tait, who is digital innovator, whose work has consistently pushed the boundaries of creativity and technology. And you might know some of his works, such as Old Spice, which was named one of the top campaigns throughout the decade, one of my personal favorite campaigns. And Iain has also worked for Google Creative Labs. He created a car racing game and collaborated with legendary composer Giorgio Moroder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Iain, how do you enjoy your visit to Ed Black Sea so far?
It's been amazing. It's been so nice to come to a place that I knew very little about and meet so many people who are really passionate about the industry. It's one of the best organized festivals I've ever been to. The chips have been great. The hospitality's been amazing. The food's been wonderful. Great wine. There's nothing to complain about. It's all good.
Excellent. Nice to hear that. Iain, throughout your career, you have been involved in some of the most creative and boundary-pushing campaigns. You were pioneering digital-first advertising, and to make it in an industry that's always shifting between our legs, how important is it to keep up with the technologies and be aware of what's happening in technical side?
For me personally, it's very important. That's definitely, it's where I get my energy from, is new things, and it keeps me constantly engaged and inspired by looking at what's out there. And it's interesting because I didn't really start out, I sort of stumbled accidentally into advertising. So, I worked on the digital side, but that was much more kind of web design and building experiences and that sort of thing. And it was only at a certain point, I think, when basically what happened was we had a client and we were building a platform to help them. This was in the late 90s, like building a platform to help them put interactive components to TV shows. So it was the start of kind of text-based voting and things like that. And the company I was working for went bust in the first .com crash, and we ended up taking this client and saying, okay, we'll carry on working for you, we'll figure it out. And we took this client, and they were part owned by an advertising agency called Mother. And so we moved in with this company, and it was next door to Mother, who were a great advertising agency, kind of in their ascendance. And we just started doing bits and pieces with them, and just got really excited about this very kind of immediate, visceral kind of work that we could make, which suddenly was like we had an engagement with people in a different way from probably the larger scale kind of builds and things we've been doing. And I think I'd always been sort of, this sounds really weird to say, but when I was a kid, I used to be, ads in the UK were really good when I was a kid. It was in its like heyday, and TV advertising was often better than the shows that were on. And so I'd grown up in that environment, and I had a lot of, sounds odd to say, but kind of like I loved ads. Like, I could remember, I can still remember kind of jingles from ads from when I was 5 years old, because they were sort of, part of my life. So it became quite a natural kind of transition into that. And then we sort of realized that actually just brands were a really good way of fun. When we were young and a bit immature, it was like brands were just a really good way of paying for us to make the kind of stuff that we wanted. And I think the closer you are to the kind of cutting edge and the less people know what the rules are of that new medium or that new thing, the more freedom you have to kind of play. So I think probably it was born out of a desire just to kind of have space to play and experiment with things, rather than using old media where the rules are established and it's like, okay, it has to be this size and this shape and work in this way.
So it's like a sandbox for you.
Exactly. That's a nice way of putting it.
You have had a wild journey, becoming the creative director at Wieden Kennedy, Google. Now you have your own company, Food, and producing campaigns that have literally gone viral over the world. But what was the most unexpected turn in your path, and what advice would you give to younger creatives, or maybe younger Iain, if he was here? What would you tell him?
Okay, so probably the biggest kind of, I guess, twist in my whole story and my fate was how I met Dan Wieden, and Dan kind of plucking me out of this relatively obscure kind of agency in the UK called Poke, and taking me to Portland to be global interactive creative director of an agency like Wieden and Kennedy. And I think part of the reason why that happened was that I was very naive. I didn't understand how important and big Dan Wyden was. I didn't treat him with this kind of reverence that everyone around him kind of did. My wife worked at Wyden Kennedy as an account person, but I knew the work, and I knew and I know they'd done Just Do It, and Dan had written that. But when we met, I think I just treated him like a normal person. And it pains me to say it, but I actually said to him, he was trying to get me to go to Portland, and I said, "Oh, Dan, with the greatest respect, like if someone had come to you 25 years ago, and I'm not comparing myself to you or Polk to Wyden and Kennedy, but you love independence, and if someone had come to you and said, leave this and come and work with me, you'd have told them to go fuck themselves." It's like, and I'm not going to tell you to go fuck yourself, but like, this is, like, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And I think, you know, some of it is probably he wasn't used to people saying no, and we had a joke about that. But I think that thing of, and then what happened was I really wasn't sure whether I was going to do it, because it was a big leap for me to go from having my own place with really good friends and making work that I loved. And we'd hired everyone there. It was like a really tight-knit group of, you know, really interesting, geeky creatives and we were making stuff that we loved, to then go and take this big risk. But I had this weird feeling that if I don't go and do this, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering, what if I'd gone and done that job with Dan Wyden? And I think the reason I'm telling that story is that my whole life, all the good decisions I've been made have been about following my instincts and my feelings about people. Whenever I've made a decision in my career about money or influence, or like, that sounds like a great job, like those things have not worked out so well. So I think following people that you really kind of have a really strong bond with and a really strong trust, and people who, you know, where that trust is kind of two-way, I think that would be my advice, is that it's always think about the people you want to be around.
I guess you can't avoid what-if moments in your life,
Yeah.
but you have to follow your gut, right?
Yeah.
Iain, as you mentioned throughout your talk, technology today is evolving faster than ever. We're getting much closer to Star Wars style of technologies, right? And you have been on the forefront of technology for all these years. How does one keep up to date with such flow of information circulating around us? And how important is it to surround yourself with people who also understand technology?
It's a great question, and I think it can be really overwhelming, and especially, you know, one of the big things with sort of the AI arms race that's going on, and some of this might come off the back of, we've had a couple of sort of very spiky innovations like Web3 and crypto and metaverse, like came, and like a lot of excitement, and then a crash afterwards. And I think a lot of people from those worlds they became very good at hype. Like, they were creating a lot of hype the whole time, and, you know, and they figured out how to do that around a product or a technology, and sort of trick people into getting into it. So I think it's really hard now, because there's a lot of people who are sort of very good at taking a technology and then converting it into something that they want to sell to you. So you'll find that, I joke about sometimes that, you know, the time that it takes to go from like a research paper in a university to a paid for service that costs you $9.99 a month forever is like, it takes a matter of weeks now for that to happen. So it can be really, really overwhelming. I'm not and I think you have to just jump in and not be overwhelmed, and figure out what your sources are, the ones that you like, the people that explain things to you in ways that are kind of understandable. I think I'm hesitating a bit around the kind of surrounding yourself with people, because I think in the olden days, I definitely would have said, and Polk was definitely that, we surrounded ourselves with brilliant developers and designers and UX people, and it created a really strong sense of community. And I think that's definitely really powerful. But I think now you can do that without necessarily being in the same place. So I think, you know, but finding a crew or a bunch of people where you're experimenting together. And I think this thing of like not worry, like if you can find other people whose taste you trust in things, and share things with them, and don't make work to try and impress everyone, just make work to try and impress people whose taste you care about. I think that becomes really powerful. Which brings me on to a point about taste and technology. I think and again, perhaps one of the reasons why being at the front edge of it is really good is that often when technologies are really immature, people haven't developed a sense of taste yet. They haven't figured out what's good and what's bad. So again, in that sandbox, you have more place to play, and you can figure out, okay, this feels good, this is exciting, this feels ethical, this feels, purposeful, this stuff feels like garbage. And I think again, having been through that cycle a bunch of times, I'm not brilliant at everything, but I think I pick up a new piece of technology and sort of figure out what it's going to be good for, how I might use it, how it might land with other people. And I think, again, part of that is probably, as you say, having been surrounded by other people who are good at that, and you sort of pick up tricks from them as well, and you start to kind of pick up a sense of taste from your kind of community of like-minded people.
Yeah, but I guess like being in the forefront means like sometimes being alone, right?
Yep.
Because people have to catch up as well.
Yeah, I mean that's really true. I mean, it happened to me a few weeks ago where I got really excited about something very geeky, like AI upscalers in an NVIDIA chip that meant that you could do some crazy thing. And I sat and I talked to a few of the people I work with, and no one was getting really excited. And I was like, I know. And my friend Nilesh, who works in Portland, was like, I'm going to pick up the phone to him. And I was like, hey, man. And he was like, cool. And we just had like this 3 hours of like, oh my God. And it was like, I found someone else to be excited with me. So I think having other people who you can sort of jam with on those things is really vital.
In your speech was, a large portion of your speech was about AI, and I think you have mastered it very well. And but not everyone is as good about it, and I think not everyone gets the results they want from AI. How important is to have a very specific, let's call it, brief for the AI, rather than asking the answer to life, the universe, and everything all at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's key. And I definitely spent. Actually, I did a talk in Barcelona where I deleted 80,000 images that I'd made, because this was all during the pandemic, where I didn't have any real reason to be using AI. I was actually using it almost in a way like, instead of being able to go out of the house and see things, I was using AI to kind of almost be a remote camera and making images of things. And so it was creating this visual stimulation for me that I wasn't getting being kind of alone in the house. But it was very directionless, like it was all over the place. And actually, I look back on them, and those images were good experimentation, and they taught me stuff, but there were so many of them, and they were just so unguided that they were ultimately useless. So they were just cluttering up my thinking and my hard drive, so I just deleted them all. And so I think having a clear brief is really important. And as I shared yesterday, I think I've been doing a lot of experimentation with music, and not because I think necessarily AI and music is a thing I want to, I particularly think it's brilliant at, but it's a field that I understand quite well. Like I can tell the difference between a musical playlist that's really authentic and one where the AI has just kind of gone, oh, here's 10 tracks that sort of roughly, they're roughly techno tracks. And it's like, I didn't ask for techno, I asked for, mid-1995 acid house, and it's like you've given me something very generic, and why have you put Basement Jacks in there and Daft Punk and whatever. So, and I think if I was doing it with a sort of field that I didn't understand so intimately, I wouldn't be able to spot how well or badly the AI was kind of doing. So that hasn't necessarily given me like really tight briefs, but it's given me an area to explore within, and some things that I'm trying to make and do. And I built some things I'm really fond of. Like I built a camera app where I can just take a picture of something, and it gives me a Spotify playlist of how it's interpreted that image. And sometimes, and I've set it up in a really interesting way with lots of branching chains in it, where if I took a picture of a festival poster, it would recognize that there's lots of words in there, and then it would look for artists and then bring back playlists or tracks from those artists. But if it was an abstract kind of, a gradient or some light, it will kind of give me a much more abstract playlist as well. And that's probably the result of like 4 or 5 different little experiments that I've been doing. Kind of, if I combine them in this way, it could be really fun.
Like one has to be enjoying the trial and error process in order to master it, right?
I think so. I think finding things that And I think this wave of AI, the stuff that kind of really excites me the most, is not necessarily what it does at a big scale, but it's about this kind of almost like AI being a co-pilot to you and helping you do things in your world that are either hard or that you could make easier or that are fun. But it's like, I think at the moment, if you can create stuff with it that's pleasing for you, I think that's a really good kind of start point.
For all those folks who couldn't make it to this year's ZBlackSea, whether it was because of scheduling, logistics, or any other reason, what would you say they're missing out on, and why should they buy next year's tickets?
A good one. Every single talk was amazing and very different as well. I think just not in a kind of scattered and chaotic way. Like it's a festival where I didn't see every talk, but I saw probably 7 or 8 talks. And each of them has kind of sparked a different thing in my brain, and I'll leave with lots of kind of new connections to make between all of those things. And I think, I've just come from a talk with a father and son musician that was amazing. And yesterday there was an artist, and then some of the best creative directors in the world sharing their work and kind of practical tips. So I think there's a bit of something for everyone, and it's, people bring their A game to the stage, I think, and so that they're really inspiring, great talks, and the parties are good too.
Yeah. So let's enjoy tonight's party. Thank you for visiting ZBlackSea.
Well, thank you for having me.
It was very insightful.